Okay, we are going to get started because we only have an hour and want to make sure that we get through our content and also get you out of here on time. Okay. Okay, so can everybody see? Whoops, we're not in the right. Okay, can everybody see the screen? Yeah, okay. All right, so welcome. Thank you for coming today. So the course that we are going to be going through is Culturally Responsive Teaching Across Learning Environments, and it is Module 2, Course A. It is the tail courses that Solved is facilitating for the New York State Department of Education. Why is this not? Okay. So I asked those of you who have been logged on if you could introduce yourselves in the chat. Just let us know who you are, what you teach, and if you would like to share why you're teaching the course and what you're hoping to get from it, that would be great as well. My name is Christine Del Negro. I am a educational consultant with Solved Consulting. I taught elementary school for 11 years. And then in 2013, I became an educational consultant, and I've been with Solved since 2020. And the bulk of my work is in New York City schools. I have worked in Massachusetts and California, Washington, D.C. as well, but 98% of my work is in New York City schools. So I'm happy to be here today and looking forward to sharing this information with you. Okay, so the course is being recorded. If you have come in late or if you need to leave early and you want to have a recording, you can let us know and we will get that to you. All of the resources will be emailed to you tomorrow. So your CTLE certificate, the slides, any of the other resources that we share with you today will be mailed to you tomorrow. Just quickly going through the chat here. Okay. So welcome to everyone as you are logging on. A question? Okay, and I just want to reiterate, because people have been coming on pretty fast and furious, because we have such a large number, I can't see everybody. So if you have a question, because there is a lot of information, and so I will be speaking quickly to try and make sure we get through all of it. But if you have a question, and please put it in the chat, and I will try to monitor the chat as we go through and stop and answer questions as I can. So today, our professional learning intentions are to look at why culturally responsive sustaining education matters and what the 4 elements of CRSE are. So keep track of what we're talking about. There is a note catcher that I will put in the chat. Actually, Beth, if you could put that in the chat now. So you can, if you prefer to take notes by hand, obviously, please do that. But if you would like to just type onto the note catcher, it is there for you as well. You'll have to make a copy of it because it's a view only document. Okay, so this is our agenda for today. There's an introduction with a warm-up. We're going to talk about why CRSE matters, what the 4 elements are, how you can think about building a classroom community across learning environments, and then you will have an opportunity to ask questions and give any comments. Okay, so the CRSE framework is an initiative by the New York State Education Department that establishes culturally responsive, sustaining guidelines for students, teachers, school and district leadership, families, community advocates, higher education, and the state education department. So it is definitely, it's not something that only one teacher can do in his or her classroom. It really is a group effort, and it's something that we all as educators need to be thinking about, and really, and it's an ongoing, it's not like a one and done kind of thing, as you will learn as we go through this. It is really constantly reevaluating your classroom environment and who the students are in a given year, because to truly be culturally responsive, your classroom is going to need to change based on the students in front of you. So what works in 2023 may not work in 2024, or may need to be tweaked based on the needs and the backgrounds of your students. So culturally responsive sustaining education has 4 components: a welcoming and affirming environment, high expectations and rigorous learning, an inclusive curriculum and assessment, and ongoing professional learning. This is the note catcher. So the link is in the chat, I believe. And we'll put it in again if you have just logged on. So you can use this to type any thoughts or questions that you have. There are going to be a couple of, there's a warm-up exercise in a minute. You can jot your thoughts down there. If you prefer, again, to do it by hand, please do that, whatever works for you. But we wanted to provide something that you could use through us that was already set up. So it's just divided up into different sections based on the you know what, you should, I thought that it was a view only, but if it's not, if you could just make a copy of it so that each person can write on their own. Okay, so the warm-up exercise, just take a minute, because as we're talking about creating environments where everybody feels welcome. So if you have a diverse group of learners, both in terms of learning styles, learning challenges, culture, language, racial backgrounds, all of those things are factors that you want to be taking into consideration when you build your classroom community. And so one of the things we want to think about is just relating to our own experiences and the situations in which we have felt more comfortable than others, and what were the factors that created those communities, whether welcoming or less welcoming. So take a couple of minutes to just think about 2 different situations, if you can. A situation in which you felt unwelcome and or unseen, and then the opposite of that, a situation where you felt that you belonged, that you were seen, that you were respected for who you were, and that people were interested in hearing about your experiences. So just jot, you can do a bullet, it doesn't have to be great detail, but just a couple of bullets for each, and think about what were the factors that contributed to the way that you felt in each experience. So I'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. Thank you, Ms. Garcia. And if you would like to share something in the chat about one experience or another, please do that. And if you have just logged on, I will put the, we're going to put the note catcher and the slides, the links in the chat. Okay, wow, the comments are coming in. Feeling uncomfortable after immediately asking about my background or when I'm ignored. Feel comfortable when questions are from natural curiosity and not based on cultural stereotypes. Seeing reading inside out and back again with my students. Most books don't take place in Asian countries or have Asian characters. Was interesting to see how interested students were in learning about new cultures. Unseen, talking to parents about where I see their child and they didn't agree. So I felt unseen and unappreciated for my knowledge and skills. Seen in a meeting, not being wealthy. When an admin thanks me for my services. Factors, equity of voice, group norms, spoken and unspoken. Unseen, middle school meetings, and as an elementary school teacher, walking into conversations in another language and not being included. Okay, there. I would love to keep reading. Thank you all for sharing. Yeah, I mean, these are all really powerful experiences and things to like food for thought, because the common, some of the common denominators when we have these experiences of not feeling seen are we don't feel valued. We don't feel like people are interested in hearing about what we have to say or our specific experiences, or we feel like that we are put into a group based on a stereotype or just an assumption of who we are because of certain characteristics or experiences that we have. And so I think like the situations where we feel welcomed and seen is when we are seen, we are appreciated for all of the things that we bring to the table and the lens through which we see the world. And people are, if questions are being asked or conversations are being had, they're coming from curiosity and a willingness to listen and hear and to understand. So I think that, there's more to it, but I think those are a lot of the characteristics that we want to cultivate in our classrooms for our students. And that thinking about how we go about doing that is, of course, the challenge. So the first tenet of culturally responsive and sustainable education is creating a welcoming and affirming environment, a place that feels safe and where all stakeholders feel as if they belong. It's space where people can find themselves represented and reflected, and where they understand that all people are treated with respect and dignity. The environment ensures that all cultural identities, i.e. race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, language, religion, socioeconomic background are affirmed, valued, and used as vehicles for teaching and learning. Okay, the second tenet of culturally responsive and sustainable education are high expectations and rigorous learning. These elements prepare the community for rigor and independent learning. The environment is academically rigorous and intellectually challenging, while also considering the different ways students learn. Instruction includes opportunities to use critical reasoning, take academic risks, and leverage a growth mindset to learn from mistakes. Messages encourage positive self-image and empower others to succeed. I think that, the high expectations and rigorous learning, I think some of the keys to that are creating different types of opportunities for students to showcase their understandings in a variety of ways, and also giving them multiple opportunities to process information and learn from each other. But I think all of those things are great, but if there is not the foundation of inclusion and acceptance and respect for each other, those the instructional strategies that we know are good pedagogy, without the foundation of acceptance and inclusion, they're not going to go very, very far. So we need to have both. I'm sorry, I feel like, okay, my slides are all over. So an inclusive curriculum. The third tenet of culturally responsive and sustainable education is creating an inclusive curriculum and assessment, which elevate historically marginalized voices. It includes opportunities to learn about power and privilege in the context of various communities, and empowers learners to be agents of positive social change. It provides the opportunity to learn about perspectives beyond one's own scope, works towards dismantling systems of biases and inequities, and decentering dominant ideologies in education. And so again, all of that, includes giving students a voice, giving them the opportunity for exploration and conversation, and discovery. So it's a really, I think, an active, you have to set up opportunities for students to actively participate in their own education, and to, again, be exposed to different ways of thinking, have the opportunity to talk and discuss and come to, at least if everyone's not going to agree, because I think that's, pretty impossible, at least can we come to an understanding of how someone else thinks, and hopefully, reach some kind of a place where we can respect the other person's views and still be able to work together. And the fourth tenet of culturally responsive and sustainable education is ongoing professional learning. And it's rooted in the idea that teaching is an adaptive process that constantly needs re-examination. And we know that, first of all, educational theory is constantly changing, and the needs of our learners are constantly changing, both because the challenges that children are dealing with now are different than what they were dealing with 10 or 15 years ago. And the individual children in your class are different each year, and they each bring with them their own set of challenges. So it's, as an educator, I think we are constantly being asked to reevaluate what we're doing, to question, is what we're doing as successful as we want it to be? And if it's not, what changes do we need to make? And then when we're talking about making sure that we have an environment that is welcoming and accepting of everyone, is that happening? And if not, what changes need to be made? And maybe it felt that way last year, and this year for some reason it doesn't, even though you may have all of the the same structures in place. What needs to be different this year that may not have been needed last year? So culturally responsive teaching can also be called culturally relevant teaching, and it is a pedagogy that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. It focuses on improving the learning capacity of diverse students who've been marginalized educationally, centers on effective and cognitive aspects of teaching and learning, concerns itself with building cognitive capacity and an academic mindset by pushing back, moves students from being dependent learners towards becoming independent learners. So again, there is, this idea, it's the teacher moving away from the front of the classroom, the students doing much of the heavy academic lifting, that productive struggle that is really, I don't know about you, but I find as a teacher is really hard to witness sometimes, because our tendency is to rush in and sort of, make it easier for them because we can see that it's hard, but that's where the learning is. And, are we giving them the opportunities to do that? And then when you're thinking about students that, maybe special ed students or have some other learning challenge, whether it's behavioral or academic, what are the opportunities that we are providing those students? Are we providing those students with the same cognitive opportunities that we're providing other students? Because that happens a lot, is we think that we have to simplify. And certainly when students have different types of learning challenges, we do need to differentiate, we do need to make changes. But when we're doing that, are we doing it in a way that's still providing students with the opportunity for those higher level thinking processes? Okay. So integrated classroom instruction would provide some of these benefits. So I'm going to show you a short video called Practicing Culturally Responsive Education. There is a place on your note catcher to take notes if you would like. And then we'll have an opportunity to just have a quick reflection. Did everybody hear that? Okay, great, thank you.
So many of my sessions that I facilitate, I'm trying to model what I want educators to do in their classrooms. So because so much of my approach is about placing the human being before the content, a lot of it starts out with just storytelling and sharing. So, I ask questions like, did you have conversations about race growing up? Did your teachers look like you? What was that like? When have you seen issues of racism or race show up in your life? Through that storytelling and that sharing, we first just kind of pierce the veil of discomfort to have the conversation. This is before we even go into a definition of what race is and what racism is. And inevitably, we have to do that content because we don't have an aligned, in this country, definition of what racism actually is and as a system versus as individual behavior and ideas. And we don't have a definition of what race is. It's a thing that we are, in fact, told, many people are told we should not talk about, though it's happening, the conversation happens in many households.
The role that CRE plays in this is that it completely, I believe, forces you to really question what you do and why you do it. Where do these ideas come from? Where are they rooted? What are they rooted in? What's the history? So the way that we teach everything, when we talk about, we teach the canon, or we're teaching to these standards, or we're teaching for kids to succeed, even the things, the language that we use to describe the goals and things that we say that children should achieve, what are they rooted in? Whose ideas are those? And the question is, when we acknowledge that these ideas are really rooted in white supremacy and white culture, and like I said earlier, that that there's a whole other segment of society that's being left out. And considering that our country is becoming more browner every day, right? we can't keep leaving that voice out. We can't keep leaving that perspective out and say that we're doing justice by our kids.
I think I realize that people come in from all different angles, right? They come in with various different backgrounds. For me, I'm very used to talking about race. It's a way that I grew up, right? Everything around me was telling me something was wrong, right? I grew up in South Central in a place where I was day to day, you know, whether it was violence or whether it was something we didn't have in school or whether it was being told what we could or could not do or learning interactions with the police, et cetera. That was just like a norm for me. And I think in bringing it into a work environment, you realize it's kind of taboo. And I think we're moving away from it being taboo. And that's the important part of the work, is being able to then say the word race, say the word racism, white supremacy, right? And really attach it to education, and nobody just kind of start to back up or get afraid to move forward and leap into the conversation. And I think now, and it hasn't been that many sessions, right? But I think now after the initial year, we're leaping a little bit more. And that feels great. Changing my mind about what it means to teach and really allowing my students to come up and to teach me, to show their classmates that they know, you know, what they know or even what they don't know, and to be like, you know, be corrected. That's a practice that I started to implement, that we're all teaching, we're all learning. Something else that it really changed for me was that I don't have to stick to the curriculum. And they asked us to, you know, honor and celebrate Native American History Month. And no matter what we were teaching, do some sort of a lesson, any kind of a lesson to incorporate something, like go online, look up Native American culture, history, something, and embed it into your practice. And I felt like I was like being pushed at first, like pushing to like really think outside the box. But I'm teaching, you know, the rock cycle right now. And how am I going to incorporate this stuff into the rock cycle? No, I don't see it. Maybe something else. Maybe if I was teaching social studies, then it, you know, I could see how it would be a lot more applicable. And this was like early on in the CCER workshops, you know. So at the time, the North Dakota pipeline access, that was going on. And there were protests about that. And there were YouTube videos from students that were the same age as my students that were out basically advocating, and they were activists. And so I did a whole unit on the rock cycle where I incorporated geographically where the North Dakota pipeline access is located, what types of rocks would be along the North Dakota pipeline access. And it's the students were so into it, they didn't want to move on from that unit. And I started playing videos of students talking about like where they live and why their homes and their neighborhoods are important to them and why this is so wrong. And I don't think I would have learned about what was going, even it's like I'm learning too as a teacher that these things are happening in real time, and my students benefited from that.
When I think of the way the CRE operates in academic spaces, specifically STEM areas like science and math, I remember learning about photosynthesis. And it was one of many words that, you know, younger me was frightened by. It was a big word, very scientific, very academic. And I remember feeling because of the way I kind of grew up, that big word in science was not something that I could be a part of, right? So what would it have been like for my teacher to start by asking me, just before we even get into the content, you know, name a time that you understood something that you didn't understand at first, right? And getting me to remember what it feels like to work through not understanding, right? Starting with me, starting with the possibility that maybe I'm not just ready to learn, eager to learn more about photosynthesis. And then from getting me into that mindset of, oh, okay, you know, it's not just me, there are other people in the room. My teacher may have been so vulnerable as to share a time that they felt there was something they didn't understand, right? So that vulnerability piece is also a big part of CRE, and shows quantifiably that students learn more with vulnerable teachers. And beyond that state, now that we're talking about photosynthesis, what is on the blocks around me, let's talk about, roses in concrete. Like, what does it look like to bring in cultural narratives from outside of our typical kind of, science lesson plan to talk about plants and what it means for things to grow in unexpected spaces, right? So at the end of the day, most of us aren't going to be scientists, but we are hopefully being given opportunities to be researchers and investigators and to investigate things that are new and peculiar and to have a curiosity. So if we start this lesson about photosynthesis with me in my neighborhood, in my community, and then go from there, and then we get into maybe the more of the content and logistics, I'm with you. You have me with you now because we started with me. And so much of what happens with our white counterparts is that world reaffirms them the minute they walk in the door, right? So when we're talking about being culturally responsive to Black and Brown students, a lot of that is about filling in that void, that missing piece of affirmation that society at large does not offer these students. So what does that mean that I have to do in that case, right? To ensure that they see themselves in this learning process.
I think a lot of times people are looking for the fix-it thing, the thing that they can put into the curriculum, the thing that they can put on the board, or something very much tangible. And when it comes to CRE, it's you. You're the process, right? So you need to become someone who does research pedagogy, right? Who does research how to become culturally responsive. And I mean, me personally, I think that's a lifelong thing, right? I'm in it for the long run. But I do understand that manageability is a thing. Teaching is very taxing and I get that. But I think that's one of the takeaways for me is just to remember that you are the work and you are the process. And as you improve your understanding of CRE, it's going to come out at all.
Okay, so if you want to just take a minute to either jot down some thoughts in the note catcher, or maybe you've done that already, or just put some thoughts in the chat, anything that you can, that you related to, either something that you are already doing or something that you think you might want to do around this idea of creating a safe space for all of the students in your classroom and helping them feel that they are being recognized for who they are and all parts of who they are. And I liked the idea that the gentleman was talking about in just terms of starting with where the student is, something from their own life to help them connect to whatever they're studying. Because I think a lot of the time students that I see just really don't see the point to some of the things that they're studying. They don't understand how they could relate to their lives in any way. So I think that that is a really thoughtful way of approaching it. And I think it, it can look different in different, with different students, with different teachers. I think there are, could look a million different ways. But just that idea of how do I help my students connect to this topic in some way so that they can see the relevance. Yeah, I would agree that I think that a lot of the curriculum is seemingly outdated. I think it can be challenging to figure out how to take the curriculum that you've been given and work with that. Yeah, relate, not, yes. Yes, the not relating to the coursework is definitely a challenge. But I really loved the, and I totally agree. I mean, I'm in classrooms, I see the curriculum, I get it. But I really loved the way that the science teacher talked about what she did with rocks. Because if you had told me that somebody could create some kind of a cultural connection to the rock cycle, I would have said there was no way. So, I think there are different, and it may not be like the most incredible connection, but sometimes it's just that small thing that we can do that just it makes a big difference. So just thinking about what is it that you can do, especially if it's something that's dry, to help kids see it, and maybe it's something like finding stories of some diverse, I'm just going with science because that's where a lot of the conversation was, but sorry, I just realized my computer was about to die. Finding, giving students information about scientists from a variety of cultures, just so that they see that there are people that look like them that do this work. Sometimes just that is, a lot. I'm not saying that that's like, do that and you're done, but, just trying to think about what are some small ways, if it feels like an overwhelming task, what are some small things that you can start with? Yeah, having students talk about their culture, sharing information about their families. There are so many different things, and then obviously it's going to look different at the elementary level than it would at the middle school or the high school level. But I think the more you think about it, the more you can things you'll come up with, or just even sharing writing from somebody that they might not have heard of. That scholars are teaching her, this is an everyday thing for me. The more they talk to me, the more I learn. Yes, absolutely. Translation of vocabulary. Yeah. Thank you guys for all of the comments. Okay. Okay. Sorry. The slide juggle is always a bit of a challenge for me. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm just having some issues with the slides. Let's stop the share for a minute. 'Cause all right, bear with me. We seem to be having some internet issues. Okay. I'm not sure what's happening here, but my computer is freezing up on me. Beth, can you put the resources from the links page for slide 23? Actually, slide 22 and slide 23 in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can get my slides up and running. And so we're just going to vary the I'm just going to vary the sequence a bit. And also I'm looking at time. So in the chat, you will see 3 links. One is slide 20, it says slide 22. It's a YouTube video called Culturally Responsive Teaching is the Antidote to Inequity. It's about a 10-minute video. I highly can you guys hear me?
We can now. You froze for a second.
Okay. So that first video it's about 10 minutes, but I highly recommend watching it, if not now, then at your convenience, because it's really informative. And she clarifies a lot of things, in my opinion. And then the next 2 links from slide 23 are 2 blogs. So actually, I'm only seeing one. There's an Edutopia article, and then Beth, I think there should be one more.
Yep, sorry, I missed one.
Oh no, that's okay. So just take a few minutes to, if you want to watch part of the video, or read one of the articles, and then we will come back together.
So in case anyone missed that, Christine was breaking up a little bit. She said to take the next few minutes to either watch that YouTube video or read one of those blog posts in the chat that are linked, and then we'll all come back together. I'm going to send those links in the chat again. Christina's having some internet issues. So while we wait for her to get back on, please look over the resources I'm sharing. There's 2 blog posts and a YouTube video, so you can choose one to watch or read. And she'll be back momentarily.